Happy Hump Day, everybody. Welcome to another podcast here for the Pro Wrestling Experience on ChicagolandSportsRadio.com. My name is Josh Lopez. You can follow me on Twitter at WZJoshLopez. I am the student of the game of professional wrestling. Welcome, everybody. We got a lot to get to today. We'll be talking about Night of Champions and Monday Night Raw. The remaining episodes of TNA, if there's any. But we have a podcast interview here that you can hear on Spreaker, on iTunes, and of course here on ChicagolandSportsRadio.com. Welcome. I'm glad to have our guest here, one of my favorite writers. His name is Mike Johnson. He's from PWInsider. That's PWInsider.com, all the way out in the East Coast. Mike, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you doing today?
Hey, Josh. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely. I'm sure it's been a pretty hectic week for you, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys do with PWInsider.
Well, PWInsider has been around since January of 2004, so we're hitting on our anniversary in just a couple of months. I'm one of the lead writers there, along with Dave Scherer, who founded the website. And, if anyone's a wrestling fan, we kind of cover pro wrestling the way that the Hollywood Reporter or Variety would cover movies and television. We write about the inside of it. We write about behind-the-scenes stuff. We write about personal situations, as well as what's going on week to week and the episodic TV shows and the live events and whatnot. So we do interviews. We do all sorts of in-depth analysis, a lot of discussion. We review wrestling history. We look at old shows. We look at current shows. So pretty much, the potpourri of professional wrestling coverage, I guess you could say.
Absolutely, and also Mike also appears on the Taz show on Play.it every single week for the PWInsider report. I was playing the ECW clip. I don't know if you heard it before he brought you in, but just thinking about that, I'm sure you grew up in the East Coast with ECW. I heard that you went to a bunch of ECW shows in the past. When the word comes up ECW, it's kind of crazy to think that revolution only started 20 years ago. It seemed like it went by really fast, right?
Well, I'd like to thank you for making me feel like a grandfather, so thank you for that. I was around ECW from 1994 to the end. I worked on their website, and I authored some of the DVDs that they released through Pioneer Home Video, and worked on the video game and the action figure lines that were released. And it seems like, and some days it seems like it was yesterday, and some days it seems like it was a lifetime ago. It's interesting how it continues to have. It's kind of like Star Trek, where the original show ended, but yet there's this nostalgia that bubbles up every now and then for the original ECW, and I think it's both good and it's bad, because I think sometimes the continued revivals have become a crutch that have prevented certain aspects of wrestling from moving forward, but at the same time there was this unique sense of fun from being at an ECW event that I don't think anyone else has really captured the full weight of, except for maybe some of the big NXT takeover shows of late. But yeah, I was around it a lot. I know we're in Chicago. I was in Chicago a number of times for ECW, including the Anarchy Rules pay-per-view, where Taz, who you just mentioned, lost the world title to Mike Awesome, and yeah, so it's a lot of good memories. And but at the same time, I feel like it was a lifetime ago.
I've been doing this. I've been part of the wrestling media now for a couple years now. I graduated here from the Illinois Center of Broadcasting a couple years ago, and I got to work with Brian Fritz, of course, with Between the Ropes. I did the live coverage for their shows, and then now I'm working with WrestleZone.com. I've stated a bunch of times on my show I don't have a lot of respect for most of the wrestling websites, just from people I met and just how they conduct themselves. But I have a lot of respect for PWInsider. Like you guys mentioned that one of the things I notice when it comes to your guys' website is that you guys are fair. Like you guys do critique. If you have something to say, you'll say it. But at the same time, you guys are not always negative and trying to prove how smart you are. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's about being. I think if you're writing about wrestling and you're trying to prove how smart you are or how inside you are, then you're writing with an agenda. I mean, what I do is I have a beat, and that beat is pro wrestling. If I was writing about baseball or volleyball or movies or television or Star Wars or Godzilla or anything, The Simpsons, that would be my beat, and my beat would be to cultivate sources, create original content, and give my opinion when it's necessary. But I think too many people, and maybe this is just me feeling like a grandfather now, too many people come into it to go, all right, I'm going to show how smart I am, and I'm going to show that WWE is this evil organization, or that Dixie Carter's a clueless idiot, or this person or that person, or this person's evil. And life isn't black and white, and neither is pro wrestling. And you kind of have to be able to understand where the gray is, and you have to be able to sort between writing things factually and giving your opinion, because there's a big world of difference between I think Sting sucks in the ring and Sting sucks in the ring. Absolutely. One is an opinion that's very subjective. Mm-hmm. One is writing it factually. And I think I don't read a lot of sites because I don't want others' opinions to kind of pepper how I think and to color the way that I look at things.
Yeah.
But in what little stuff I've seen, there's far too much of opinion being stated as fact. Yeah. For me, in that, I'd be comfortable putting something on the site that looked like that. And I think there's far too many of that, and there's far too much of there's far too many people who create and cultivate their own original content through their own sources, and far too many websites that the job description seems to be, oh, well, let me refresh PWInsider all day and see what they have, and I'll rewrite what they put up there, and then maybe I'll credit them, maybe I won't, and sometimes I'll add an extra sentence, and sometimes I won't copy it correctly, which I think there's a lot of websites that do that, and that always annoys me because, I feel like they're playing off of my hard work or others' hard work, whether it's myself or Dave Meltzer or Jason Powell or whoever. And the other is, one, they don't deserve to make a living off of my hard work.
Correct.
And two, anybody who's looking for original content, they're not really getting it, so their time is being wasted. And if somebody is going to a website looking for information on something they care about and they're getting a piss-poor version of that,
Correct.
They've wasted their time, and chances are they're not going to go seek out another entity that might give them what they're looking for. So I always worry about that as well. But again, that's just from my own personal stance.
I totally agree with you. And from my standpoint, like, what I do when it comes to, like, the writing standpoint, like, all I do is the show reports. And I take that as a challenge because, you're just trying to dissect and put what's actually on the show. I'm not with having an agenda and saying, oh, I'm coming up with my opinions on a match or whatever. I don't do star ratings or whatever. I just put what happens on the show. And I think that's also helped me be more in tune with the product than I say most other media members, because like I'm watching what's happening on TV. I'm not focusing what people are saying on Twitter and then taking that as fact as well. I think that's an issue when it comes to that part of the wrestling media world as well. But also from this standpoint, I think the perspective from a lot of the members in the media are kind of outdated, to be honest with you. There's a lot of perspective from traditional NWA and WCW fans from the 70s and 80s, and I don't think there's a balance in there where we have a perspective from people who grew up from the 90s or even in the early 2000s, you know what I mean?
It's weird because everyone always uses the term internet wrestling community, and I don't know what that community is because I'm not part of it.
Yeah, me either.
I think, that's sort of like this broad term that people use to paintbrush wrestling fans, and I think that's like being like, oh, well, all baseball fans feel the same way, and all internet fans feel the same way, and that's just, like, to me, that's just a garbage misrepresentation. Everybody kind of has their own way, their own thought process. Everyone has their own likes and dislikes, and I think once you start generalizing opinions, and once you start generalizing, oh, well, this fan base from this time period thinks this, or this time period feels like this, I think you're making a grave mistake because, what happens is there's different perspectives, and in the comic book universe, there's often a saying that said, what's the best version of the Justice League, or what's the best version of the Avengers? And everybody will argue about, oh, it was this or it was that, and what it always boils down to is, what was the version that you read when you were growing up? And I think that's the same thing with pro wrestling. Whatever pro wrestling you saw growing up was the best wrestling of all time and was the way wrestling should be, because if you watch the AWA or you watch ECW or you watch the Attitude Era or you watch NXT, if that was your first exposure to what pro wrestling is, then in your mind the rules are defined by that entity.
Correct.
So anything outside of that box, you're going to look at and tilt your head and go, well, that's not right because it should be this way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel like things like the IWC and whatnot, it's just people throwing stuff out there because you're going to put 10 people in a room, and those 10 people are not going to be able to agree on where they want to get lunch, much less pro wrestling or football or baseball or any ideals whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a big fan of saying, oh, well, these people look at it this way and we don't have enough of that. I think each person needs to bring their own voice, and if they do their work, they do their research, they do their understanding, and they try to learn about what they're writing about, to me, that's far more important than, oh, well, there's 10,000 websites that are antiquated. I think everybody brings a different voice, and if they're creating their own original sourced content or their own originally researched content with a smart writing, with a smart voice to it, that's all anybody should really be concerned about.
Night of Champions happened this past Sunday on the WWE Network, and we're talking to Mike Johnson from PWInsider.com. You can follow him at Twitter at MikePWInsider. Mike, what was your thoughts on the show this past Sunday? I thought it was a pretty solid show, one of the better Night of Champions I've saw in the past couple years.
I thought the wrestling itself was good. I have a lot of problems. I had some personal problems with the way the creative was set up. You know, Seth Rollins is supposed to be your top villain, but they kind of put him in an underdog situation where here he is, he's back-to-back and potentially a third match, and he had two really good matches in a row. To me, that only kind of leads the audience to want to cheer for him. And I thought that was kind of backwards. I also felt, and I wrote about this and talked about this a lot on PWInsider.com, the Charlotte-Nikki Bella thing was kind of backwards, where if this whole moment was about the Divas Revolution and crowning Charlotte as the next title holder, why did Nikki Bella have 99% of the offense and make Charlotte kind of look like it was a fluke that she caught her in the submission? But I thought some of the wrestling on the show was very good. For the bell-to-bell action aspect of it, I think you got a solid show. But I think in terms of some of the logical storytelling, so to speak, there were definitely things that made me scratch my head and go, well, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. But sometimes WWE doesn't want you to think about it. They just want you to accept things at face value. So.
Now, Seth Rollins is still the WWE champion. We saw Cain come back. I thought that was only a matter of time, especially what happened a couple of months ago. And now, we saw what happened on Raw. Cain dragged Rollins under the ring. Cain is known to do that. It's his character. That's what we come to know with Cain. Obviously, it's going to be a semi-main event feud because we got Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell match, which I think is a good idea, actually. I don't know if fans would be interested if they drawn out another Brock-Taker match till WrestleMania. So having a match like that in a market like LA, I think that's great. But for this Seth Rollins-Cain match, do you think there'll be a good return of investment or no?
Well, I mean, they're obviously going to have to do it, and I mean, they continue that storyline on the episode of SmackDown that's going to air tomorrow. And to me, I look at this as sort of like a short-term bridge for Seth until they figure out what the next big storyline arc for him is. I don't think a long, blown-out 3-4 month Cain program is really the way to go. But as a one-time attraction, especially Cain with the mask and the undercard of Undertaker wrestling Brock at Hell in the Cell, to me, that's kind of, if you're looking to get people interested because Undertaker's going to be there, that old school, big red demon Cain kind of plays into the same nostalgia. So from that perspective, I understand why they would want to create something a little bit outside the norm and a little bit of a sort of a spectacle to bring more eyeballs onto the network. Because really, the goal at this point is to keep creating events that will entice people to one, try the network for free and transform them into paid subscribers. So to me, as a short-term thing, it's fine. I understand why they're going with it. I think it wouldn't be a good pay-per-view main event if it had to carry the entire show and be the anchor.
Yeah.
But with the Undertaker deal, it's a nice secondary spectacle that they can put underneath and go, oh, well, I'm going to get that too? Okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. And let me ask you this. So Brock is on the Go to Hell tour, and you also report and look into like the business side as far as ratings and network subscriptions. Do you think that's a good marketing idea to have Brock in these three separate things? We got the MSG show next Saturday, and then the podcast, and then Hell in the Cell. Do you think that's a smart network strategy?
Well, of course it is, because the only way you're going to get to see Brock wrestle is to pay for the WWE Network.
Exactly.
So, if you want to see Brock go face-to-face with Steve Austin, which has never happened, ever in wrestling. And even if they're just going to talk, you know, you might have the hope of, oh, my God, maybe they're going to get into it. Maybe we are going to get that match at WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. So there's that enticement factor there. Brock Lesnar against Big Show, I think on paper, not a really exciting match. But, hey, Brock Lesnar in Madison Square Garden for the first time since WrestleMania 20 when he wrestled Goldberg and left the company, and it's live on the network. Okay, that's kind of cool. And, hey, Brock against Undertaker, you know, and now we're going to tie them all together as kind of a tour. Well, I'm going to want to see all three parts of this story and see what happens. So, I mean, I get it. It's all about using Brock and using him as a unique attraction to get people to plunk down their $10. The same way back in the day, Bruno Sammartino might appear on the television, but if you want to see Bruno wrestle, you better go to the Garden. You better go to the Pittsburgh Civic Center and pay your money to see Bruno, to see him challenge or fight for the belt. And it's a 21st century version of that old promotion technique.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. And let me ask you this. As a fellow Chicagoan, I saw the report you guys had, I think, about last week or the week before that, about update on the CM Punk, Chris Amon lawsuit situation. As a fellow Chicago native, just interested, what's the updates when it comes to this lawsuit between two other fellow Chicago natives? Well, actually, three in this case.
Yeah, just going back to Colt Cabana.
Yeah.
Well, you know, obviously Chris Amon is a WWE physician. He's suing CM Punk and Colt Cabana for statements that he felt were slanderous about him and his medical practice when he was examining Punk, which Punk and Cabana talked about on their podcast in November of 2014, where Punk pretty much vented his spleen about why he left WWE and moved on with his life. You know, the latest on it is that they've gone back and forth with motions, and Punk filed a defense stating basically that he believed that Amon and WWE were in collusion, and that this lawsuit was filed as a way to try and get back at Punk for embarrassing things that he said about WWE by relating his experiences over the course of his career within professional wrestling and by virtue of working for WWE, and that they were doing it to get back at Punk because they had no other way to get back at him. He also alleged that Amon, in his role as a WWE ringside physician and doctor for the company, would put WWE's well-being ahead of CM Punk and other performers of the company. WWE, as soon as we wrote about it, I reached out to them. They gave us a statement pretty much denying that any of that was true and that Amon filed the lawsuit under his own accord because Punk had made damaging comments about him. Punk's attorneys also filed a note saying, how can this man be suing us for damages? He didn't lose his WWE position. There's no sign that he was damaged by anything that was said about him. So there's no way to prove any of these damages. And they also filed a claim that when you listen to the podcast, Amon's name is only mentioned in a certain portion, and that portion of the podcast is not something that Amon has taken issue with in any of his filed paperwork with the lawsuit, and that he was never mentioned by name in any of the critical things that were said about him. There were terms like doc and they and their that were mentioned, and therefore, one, there's no way you could believe that that was being stated about Chris Amon. Two, it can't be proven that it was said about Chris Amon. And three, in order to tie it together, they're making a leap that really can't be made because Punk says that he was not speaking about Amon in those passages. So it's really going to be an interesting situation. That it's not going to go to court for at least the next couple of years. They're just now entering a discovery phase where each side is going to investigate and lay their claims out and lay their court case out, and then witnesses will be called, and eventually, hopefully, it's either going to be settled or it's going to go to trial. It's hard to predict what's going to happen there because CM Punk has never been one to kind of blink and fold under scrutiny, and I don't know what he has in his arsenal to combat what Amon has claimed. But, you know, what it all comes down to is this. You know, Punk claimed that WWE did not take care of him when it came to what he believed what he was told at the time to be a fatty deposit, and he claims that he was prescribed things like Z-Packs and whatnot to keep him on the road. Yeah. And then when he left WWE, he kept getting worse and worse and worse, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor that looked at him took one look and said, you've got a MRSA infection in your back, which, for those who don't know, it's a very dangerous form of staph infection. And, you know, Punk had the procedure done to get it all cleaned out, and afterwards immediately felt a lot better. And, you know, what it all comes down to me is if Punk can prove that he had a staph infection and that it was removed, which I would assume there's medical records of that somewhere. It certainly bolsters his case, but as with a lot of things when it comes to court and it comes to law, it's going to be played out by a lot of attorneys, and really the attorneys are going to be the only ones who win because they're the ones that are going to get paid a lot of money to work on this thing.
We're talking to Mike Johnson from PWInsider.com. A couple more things before we let you go, Mike. We appreciate you taking your time to come on the show today. Obviously, a lot of people know in the wrestling world that since the Attitude Era, there's been a seasonal decline in ratings. Of course, it's going from one network to the next. I was kind of surprised as a wrestling fan growing up in the 90s, seeing the fact that WWE was even allowed to go back on USA Network with the stuff they were doing in the Attitude Era. But is there any concern?
Well, USA didn't have a problem with it back in the day. Remember that.
Mm-hmm. So is there any anger? Is there anything you're hearing about USA's frustrations when it comes to recent ratings that are coming out with the WWE?
Well, what you have to remember is USA's having those frustrations across the board. A lot of their TV series that had existed and that brought them good ratings, whether it be Burn Notice and things of that nature, those shows have ended, and the shows that have come up in their place, shows like Covert Affairs, which was just canceled, and Homeland, which is doing okay but not amazing. They haven't been able to find the right formula to kind of bring themselves back to the prominence where they were just a couple of years ago. Obviously there's a concern that the WWE ratings are down. One of the reasons they're down right now is Monday Night Football is doing massive ratings, which are far surpassing not just WWE, but anything anybody else has on cable that night. So that's part of it, and I think, a big part of it is WWE's in kind of that cocoon phase where we don't know what the next generation of that company is going to look like. We don't know if they're really touching upon the pulse of what the audience wants. And you know what? A lot of these shows at times they do feel bloated. They feel like there's segments that they go on and on and on, and they really don't accomplish anything that they couldn't have accomplished in 3 minutes. And there's segments that are put in there kind of placeholders just because, we need to put something in the 9:25 segment. And I think WWE's got to streamline the way they present the show, and there's no easy answers. I don't think putting 3 hours of wrestling matches, even great wrestling matches on, are going to be the answer, but they've got to figure out a mix of something that's entertaining and characters that are going to interest the audience, because other than New Day, there haven't been a lot of brand new acts that have really kind of grabbed the mindset of the audience and really captured their imagination. And you've got a lot of acts that are long in the tooth. You've got a lot of talents that work very hard. I'm not knocking the work of anybody, but there are definitely guys and girls who work hard but haven't really captured the imagination of the audience the way that, say, New Day has in the last couple of months. And you've also got WWE's mindset is always when something's a little worrisome or something's a little out of control, we go back to what we know. And what do they know? They know big giants. Well, look, we've just got Braun Strowman who debuted, and they go back to the veterans because, all right, we can trust them. They've drawn money for us in the past, and we know they can do what we need them to do on TV. So suddenly, Chris Jericho's back on TV. Suddenly, Cain is back on TV. Hey, look, the Dudley Boys are back for the first time in a decade. And I'm not knocking those decisions and the movement of those pieces on the chessboard, but there has to be a time and a place where they go, all right, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and I'm just throwing names out here. You guys are the guys. You guys have to drag the cart, and we're going to put our faith behind you. Because really, they haven't put any faith behind anybody. When you think about it, they build them to a certain point, but at the end of the day, they're not more important than the older guard. Even case in point, the Seth Rollins build-up with Sting. The beginning of that build-up was, Seth Rollins, you're not half the man that Triple H is. Well, why is Triple H getting over like that?
Yeah.
He's on the road. He's not working there full time. And okay, sure, they'll do a match with him and Seth, or down the line, or him and somebody else, and I'm sure it'll be a big attraction, and he'll get paid a lot of money to do it. But at the end of the day, he's not going to Moline. He's not going to Moline, Illinois, to wrestle on the live event.
Yeah, exactly.
Triple H ain't going to the Allstate Arena the next time there's a non-televised show. So you have to kind of put your faith, and you have to kind of hope to put the power behind the guys who are going to be there. I know there's a lot of criticism on Cena, but at the end of the day, John's at 95% of those live events. So, he deserves to have that positioning. I feel like they're trying to find that happy medium between the veterans that they believe the audience will entice to come, and the newer guys that I think a portion of the audience wants to see as the top guys, but WWE hasn't pulled that trigger yet.
Yeah,
they have in name, but they really haven't in sort of the long-term faith of, all right, well, he might be in the main event, but is he going to be in the main event for 6 months from now, or is he in the main event just because we don't have a more established name to come in and appear? And I think the audience, when they start yo-yoing the guys up and down the card, the audience realizes that, and there is a reaction to that.
Yeah, and I agree, and it's a tough era to figure out in my point of view. I mean, 70s, 80s, over-the-top characters, 90s, you had that Grudge. I mean, I like the Ruthless Aggression era. I thought that was cool, but it seems like they can't find out what they want in their product today or what they're catering to, because honestly, can anybody, even outside of wrestling, can figure out what today's society is, you know what I mean?
I think they're closer to finding what the audience wants with NXT.
Yeah.
But, the problem with that is, as we've seen with a lot of NXT talents that have come up, once, you have a 60-plus-year-old man who's in charge of everything. And, listen, I'm 41, and I just looked on VH1 the other night, and the Streamy Awards were on. And I couldn't have told you who one of these people were if I walked past them in the street. But they have millions and millions of online followers, and they're huge personalities and celebrities within their own right. I was just reading something about a YouTube personality named Tyler Oakley, and he's doing a book signing tour, and the book signing appearance near me in New Jersey, about a half hour away from where I live in New York, it's sold out in advance. And meanwhile, they've got names like Sammy Hagar also appearing at the store. Sammy Hagar sold billions of records throughout his career as a singer, as a solo artist, as lead singer of Van Halen. Tons of books available for Sammy Hagar. There's a different audience and a different mindset now for the current generation. And I'm not knocking Vince when I say this, but to expect Vince to understand it and know how he can touch upon that pulse is like asking 41-year-old Mike Johnson to go, all right, point out which YouTube stars are going to be the most successful when they launch their YouTube channels next year. Exactly. How the hell would I know?
Yeah.
It's not my world. It's not in my periphery. I'd love to know because I could probably make some money doing it. But I think there's a changing of the guard with technology and the way media is distributed, and I think it's becoming harder and harder for WWE and all multimedia companies, not just WWE, to figure out what the next generation of their fan base wants, because the next generation of their fan base is not going to be doing the traditional things that the old fan base wanted.
Make sure you follow Mike Johnson on Twitter at Mike PWInsider, and also check out his appearances on the Taz Show on Play.it, the PWInsider Report, also PWInsider.com. Mike, thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to come out today. I had a blast getting to talk to you. You're a great guy, and I'd love to have you back on the show sometime.
Josh, it was my pleasure, and I want to send all the love I can to the Chicago area. I'm a big fan of Chicago. First time I went to Navy Pier, I loved the hell out of it, and big fan of that city, and you guys got some great deep dish pizza, so send some my way, please.
Will do. Talk to you later, buddy.
Take care. Have a great day.